Okay, let's start. Capital and production. Production efforts are made to create goods for consumption, which directly satisfy wants, but not all production is of consumer goods. The oven used to bake bread is an example, as is the production of flour, yeast, and the bakery. The oven was constructed with the intention of supporting bread production. The oven, in other words, makes or was at least intended to make it easier to make bread, and thus our productivity increases. These means of production that only indirectly satisfy consumer wants are called capital or capital goods. A consumer who buys bread does not care if the baker has an oven. Consumers generally care only about the consumer good and how well it satisfies their wants, not what or how much capital is used in the process of producing it. But while his customers do not care, the baker certainly does. With the oven, more bread can be produced with less work. The effect of using capital is more output per unit of input, typically and especially labor, which means more wants can be satisfied using the same amount of resources. For the baker, this means more bread can be baked at lower cost. The purpose of capital and why it is used and created is that it increases our productivity. We get more valued output for the invested inputs.
So, Shian, have you not covered this last time?
We did. So we'll start.
Okay, so you're reading in context to give this in context.
Yeah, I remember that we left off here. Yeah, I think this could be a long context. So I actually not read it entirely. Let me just read the last paragraph. So actually that's a good point. I don't think we need to go over it again. So I'll start from here. We refer to the amount of capital used in different combinations, such as oven made from rocks in the fire, that allow society to produce distinct goods and services as the economy's capital structure. This structure, as well as everything it comprises, was created. The production of new capital adds to the structure by adding or improving productive capabilities, maintain investments, extend existing capital's usefulness, and divestments and reallocations of shift capital to the production of other goods, refining, adjusting, and changing the structure, and thus the economy's productive capability. The actions which bring about continuous change to the capital structures are carried out by entrepreneurs. So I think I'm not actually able to recall if we discussed that example in the last session of the baker. I remember we did discuss the example that the baker does not have any value does not produce any value for the consumer by buying a car engine and using it as a bakery. So that's a great example of how resource cost is not a measure of cost. It's the value that determines the cost, not the other way around. So how labor theory goes into how just because I dig a hole, I deserve some compensation for that. But that is not true, because you could be wasting resources, you could be producing things which consumer does not value. And for the context that we're discussing this, the consumer is sovereign. So nobody is obliged to pay you for your efforts. So we discussed how baker is incentivized to use capital goods which directly increase his output, which could mean using an oven or using different kinds of bread that he expects that the consumer will value more. And I don't know if I remember discussing this, that it could be as simple as just gathering rocks. So it takes the investment. The baker, in a very rudimentary example, can take rocks and set up a simple oven built to produce different kinds of bread. But that's an investment that also requires investment in itself. What that means is that once you're able to set up that simplistic oven, you still need to invest into it to maintain the cost of running it. So this is how capital goods also are in cost, also subject to competition, subject to maintenance costs, and an innovation that comes with continuous uncertainty and continuous innovation that we discussed. So I start with here the role of the I think very relevant to the times that we're living in, because if you've heard about the common saying that Bitcoin is not for Silicon Valley, because I think 2021 changed it for crypto. We have seen a lot of VC investments into crypto, if not Bitcoin. But we have seen the problem with that, because it's very difficult to for traditional VCs to find the merit of investing into Bitcoin, because you have to actually produce value. You cannot create a closed network with Bitcoin because nobody is incentivized to use it, because you otherwise you get closed into a closed network. So that created the crypto bubble that we saw 2 years ago. And now there are more VCs and more respect-worthy venture capitalists who are funding Bitcoin projects. But it was very interesting to me that Bitcoin, as internet money as it is, was not directly accepted by Silicon Valley, which was considered, at least in my mind, in the average person's mind, to be the beacon of innovation and leading industries. So I think entrepreneurs in the modern day have, at least in the last 2 decades, have Silicon Valley has played a huge role because of mobile wave and automation through AI and other internet technologies. So Bitcoin is a direct outcome of that. Bitcoin is decades of research into computer science, internet, and computer networks. So you would expect that Bitcoin would have been led by a lot of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, but that case, it was led by cypherpunks, it was led by cryptographers, and many weirdos who eventually turned out to be right. So if you're on Twitter, you know about this, that it's not the traditional VC firms that were leading Bitcoin. I think we are seeing some change. Jeff Booth and I can't remember other VC firms, honestly. But Capital is the most famous Bitcoin, and 1031 are the most famous Bitcoin VC firms that exist today. They've only been in the last 4 to 5 years. Yeah, so just setting the context and then we'll start from here. The role of the entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are in the business of creating our future. They do this by creating new goods or refining and improving production. In both cases, they bring about changes to the capital structure by either changing the use of existing capital or creating new capital. The aim in both is to create more value for consumers. If they are successful entrepreneurs, they get paid in profits. However, time and risk play an important role in this. Like the baker who created a simple oven out of rocks and thereby could provide consumers with new types of bread, entrepreneurs imagine and bet that they can better satisfy consumers. This means they make investments to change things, seeking to create more value by increasing value productivity. They produce goods because they believe those goods will better serve consumers and therefore will be in great demand. When such an investment is successful, consumers get more value at lower cost, part of which entrepreneurs keep as profit. When it fails, which means consumers do not approve of what entrepreneurs offer, the investment loses value and may be lost completely. The major problem entrepreneurs face is that the value of production effort is not known until it is completed. It is only when the finished good is sold that the entrepreneur learns if the investment was worthwhile, if consumers want the good. In contrast, costs are known and incurred long before the good is completed and offered for sale. Note that these costs are not merely the inputs that make the output, such as the flour, yeast, and water that are turned into bread, but also the capital needed, the oven, the bakery, etc. Even in those cases where an entrepreneur takes orders and is paid before producing the actual good, some costs are incurred as part of the not yet produced good. Those costs include such things as setting up the business, experimenting with capital, figuring out how to make an oven, developing a recipe or blueprint for production. Investments must be made to produce the good, which can then be sold. So entrepreneurs, I think my interpretation of it, differ from businessmen in a very, very simple yet subtle way. That businessmen are creating products that the market already values. They are one participant in the market economy. But entrepreneurs are imagining and anticipating the value that the customers or consumers will pay for in future. So they naturally have to invest into the uncertainty, and will come to the technical term of at least how Austrian economics define it. But entrepreneurs, by definition, are trying to create future value. What that means is that they incur cost right now to produce something that they expect that somebody will pay them more than what they invested. So this is the profit that they will take, and thereby they are incentivized to take that risk. And they differ from every other business because every other business has a clear cost and P&L analysis that you can do. This problem is often referred to as uncertainty bearing. So yeah, this is the term that this book uses. Entrepreneurship is the economic function of bearing the uncertainty of creating future goods. Production without knowledge of whether it is value creative and profitable or will it incur a loss. It is the potential for profit that justifies undertaking production and bearing the uncertainty of an entrepreneurial investment. It is the possibility of suffering losses that moderates those efforts and forces entrepreneurs to be responsive to consumer wants. And entrepreneurs must be responsive because consumers are sovereign in their choices to purchase and use goods, which means only consumers determine the value of goods. So, yeah, it is the possibility of suffering losses that moderates those efforts and forces entrepreneurs to be responsive to consumer wants. So this goes on to highlight the problem with any other money than Bitcoin, because any other money than Bitcoin is generally a closed network. So gold is the other free market money. It's discovered by the free market. Nobody is forcing you to use gold. But any banking system, fiat currencies are coerced into use. What that means is that you cannot pay your taxes in Bitcoin. So you are forced to use services by the state by paying them in fiat currency, and they are not incentivized uh, to serve you always, because there is no possibility of suffering losses. A central bank can continue to produce more fiat units and not bear the consequences, at least directly. Because the value of any good is unknown, cannot be known before it is used, entrepreneurs invest in production based on what they imagine consumers will value. The baker created the oven because he imagined the new types of bread would serve consumers better. The higher expected value justifies the cost of developing and building the oven. By undertaking this endeavor, the baker changed what is and what can be produced in the economy. Indeed, the actions of entrepreneurs direct overall production by defining and adjusting the economy's capital structure. In establishing productive capability and determining what goods can and will be produced, entrepreneurship drives the market process. All goods produced and made available to us, whether they end up successful and profitable or not, are the results of entrepreneurial undertaking, entrepreneurs' uncertainty bearing. So I'll just share a tidbit and just take a quick pause here, because so I think, at least for me, how I think of it is the first entrepreneur, at least how we conceive or imagine, was the first ape that used the opposable thumb. And why I say that is because humans differentiate themselves from the rest of the wild and rest of the species on the planet by being able to be tools and cooperate among each other. So other species, of course, do cooperate, and they do to a fair degree use tools, but not to the extent that humans are able to manipulate natural resources. And a large reason why they are able to do that is because they have opposable thumbs. So the entrepreneur that the ape was trying to experiment with his palm and successfully used a tool. Maybe he burned himself, maybe he killed himself, maybe he took a lot of social risk. Between the monkeys, the ape, the ancestor that we had as a species. But that's the uncertainty bearing that he chose to still take. And it's a result of that that we were able to discover fire. And it was through fire that we were able to become the cognitive species that we are. We are able to project into future. We're able to imagine things and do calculations and do math. So it's how innovation, or it's how future market products and services come into being, because somebody took the cost of uncertainty bearing. Yeah. Anything to share, or you know?
Yeah, so there's this book called by Kelly. I don't remember his first name. It's called What Technology Wants. It claims that the first technology that human being like brought in and that changed. Before fire was bipedal. Like they became bipedal. Most of the animals, there are hardly any animals who had 4 limbs to do. Human beings did that. And the second technology, of course, they say language and fire. Yeah, that's what the book claims. Differentiate us.
Yep. I did not catch the last sentence.
So the name of this book's author is Kevin Kelly. He's like very, very good writer. He's the one who founded Wired magazine.
Wow.
His book is called What Technology Wants, and it's an exploration as to where the technology will go in future, and it starts from the first piece of technology that came in. And by technology, the author means anything that significantly alters the way life is lived for human beings. So, for example, language is a piece of technology for him. Bipedalism is a piece of technology for him. Fire is a piece of technology for him. Yeah.
Right. Yep. That's a great definition, I think, because I think Jeff Booth famously is quoted in Bitcoin for saying that technology is anything that saves you time, and time is the ultimate currency of being alive. So I think I'm capable of I think that definition is even more descriptive or broader, that it changes how life is lived. So yeah, it's outside of our imagination how life could be lived. So it's we do not even know what potential technologies we by definition cannot imagine technologies can exist in future. However, while this is the outcome and indication of their efforts, individual entrepreneurs are not in the business of adjusting the capital structure for overall efficiency or social good. Entrepreneurs invest in particular productive capabilities in pursuit of profits, but it is very difficult to figure out what consumers will find valuable, which means entrepreneurship is fraught with failure. The entrepreneur's task is in fact made even more difficult in markets where it is not enough to produce something valuable, but they must outdo each other in terms of value. Entrepreneurs compete to serve consumers in the best possible way. So yeah, as difficult as entrepreneurs' life can be, it's the best way to serve consumers and thereby individuals. So this is the free market way. We arrive at the nice things that we use every day because people are competing to serve you every day. Entrepreneurs make mistakes. The future is very difficult to predict. This is what entrepreneurs attempt to do. They invest in creating the future in hope that consumers will find it valuable. And they do so by competing with the visions of other entrepreneurs. So it should be no surprise that there is an extremely high rate of failure. This may seem inefficient or wasteful, but it is not. It would be if what consumers value were known. Because with such knowledge of the future, production can be easily streamlined for efficiency. Entrepreneurship, however, solves another problem. Value is in the mind of consumers. It is not known beforehand. But consumers experience it when they use a good to satisfy wants. Very often, consumers do not themselves know how to best satisfy their wants. Instead, entrepreneurs imagine a good they think, based on their own ingenuity, experience, and understanding, will serve consumers to provide greater value than the goods already offered for sale and therefore have a chance to earn profits. Entrepreneurs must step ahead of consumers and introduce to them a valuable solution that they had previously not considered. As Henry Ford is thought to have said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Indeed, most people probably thought they simply wanted faster horses, but Ford imagined that horseless buggies would offer higher value to consumers, and he was able to offer automobiles at prices that consumers would buy. The fact is that consumers, whether or not they can say what goods they want, always chose between the goods offered to them. That's when consumers exercise their sovereignty, and entrepreneurs cannot force consumers to buy anything. They can produce goods that consumers value and therefore choose. The calculus for a consumer is simple but difficult for entrepreneurs to foresee and meet. First, the good has to. So I'll actually take pause here because this book now highlights. Give me 1 second pause. So yeah, this book summarizes four distinct ways in which entrepreneurs are competing, and yeah, so this is the process that is undertaken before arriving at the final consumer good. So I'll just read this again. The calculus for consumers is simple, difficult for entrepreneurs to foresee and meet. First, the good has to offer value by satisfying some want that the consumer has. If what the entrepreneur offers has no value to the consumer, then it is not a good. Second, the good must offer a better, more valuable means to satisfy want than others offering to satisfy that same want. If it does not, then the good is ineffective and of lesser value for satisfying want. Consequently, the entrepreneur must offer it at a lower price to make it worthwhile to the consumer. So yeah, so it's not only first needing to be a product that satisfies some want for the consumer to even consider it. And if they don't find any value, then it is not a good. But it also must be a better, more valuable um, than other goods offering to satisfy that same want. So it's any good is trying to solve a human life problem or trying to give an experience for the human. So it is essentially competing with every other human experience because every payment that humans make is an opportunity cost to do anything else with that money. So you're inherently always competing with the existing goods and services in the market. Third, the good must offer value that exceeds the good that promise to satisfy other wants. Entrepreneurs compete for the consumer's money. So this highlights a related point. It's not just the same goods or same experience that you are expecting to get, but also other experiences that you could have got with the same money. Fourth, the good must offer enough value for the consumer to buy it now rather than choose to hold on to their money and buy something else in the future. Yeah. So I think this point is pretty self-explanatory, but it goes to highlight how overvalued all the entire financial industry is because people are forced to be investors. So it not does not create the right incentives for people to choose to hold on to their money because savings in the modern world is just become this difficult thing, and you are forced to be an investor to be a saver. Most people still look at Bitcoin as an asset or as an investment option, not as money. So it just goes on to show that you're always forced to use the money that you've already earned, already worked hard to get. Now you're forced to make a choice about what to do with it instead of just stacking sats and seeing your purchasing power go up. The entrepreneur must provide value in accordance with all of these layers of consumer valuation. Needless to say, entrepreneurs attempt to do something extremely difficult. They do so because they believe they will profit in some way in the end. But whether or not they do, the attempts to create value and provide a crucial service to other entrepreneurs. Their attempts to create value provide a crucial service to other entrepreneurs and the economy overall. We discussed economic calculation chapter 7. As they compete based on their own knowledge and imaginations, how they expect to best be of service to consumers, they create knowledge for the economy overall. Entrepreneurs' discoveries of what consumers value are identified by profits, guide new entrepreneurs in their efforts. Similarly, with losses, which suggest to other entrepreneurs that they should try something different. Consequently, every attempted entrepreneurial undertaking can take advantage of the knowledge and experiences of previous entrepreneurs. This makes entrepreneurial value production cumulative. Successes are augmented and become stepping stone for future production. Errors are weeded out. I think the best example of this paragraph is highlighted in open source development. Because open source development are not guided by some authority and there is no one fixed way to innovate, so you are free to innovate on open networks, then you inherently create knowledge even with failure. Because if your product or your software is not able to cater to the needs or wants of the consumer, then you are weeded out and the software is weeded out. And if your software is successful, other people are incentivized to work on it. So this is how a lot of open source infrastructure, be it Bitcoin, be it outside of it, has been built because it's inherently built into its mechanism that success will lead to success for the entire open source development community, and failure will create good signal and good information for open source to learn how to not build things. It would be wrong to discourage failing entrepreneurs, however, even though they were unsuccessful and suffer losses, they provided the economy with an invaluable service of making information available on what does not work. This is valuable information for all other entrepreneurs. As entrepreneurs fail, the resources, capital that they invested become available to other entrepreneurs who can then increase their own production or try something new. In sum, entrepreneurs serve consumers by creating our future. They do this by trying ideas for new imagined goods and based on their expected value, paying wages to workers and developing new capital. When entrepreneurs err in their choices, they personally suffer the loss of those investments. That loss is the totality of the investment they made in production, wages paid to employees, and prices paid to capital suppliers. Yep, so we end this chapter. If there are any thoughts, I'll just take a quick pause.
Yeah, two things. I mean, firstly, you quoted Henry Ford, I think, who said that if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? Yeah. And it's, I wasn't aware of this statement. I was like very impressed by what Steve Jobs said, and I posted that image in the chat section. Okay, when Steve Jobs had on many occasions said that it's not the customer's job to know what they want. Okay, and if when Steve Jobs came up with the iPhone, like there was mockery all over the internet, and people said that these applications are available for free, on the web, why would people pay you to download them on the phone, right? Whatever applications we have today on our smartphones, these applications are available on the internet as well, on the browser as well for free. Like for instance, we have Discord on the phone, we also have it available on the web. So like it was a new concept. I think Apple was the first operating system that came up with an app store, and it did nothing else. It just amalgamated the data that was available on the World Wide Web into an application store where you have to pay for it and download it. And there was mockery all over the internet that who's going to pay money to download data that is already freely available on the World Wide Web. And today, I think billions and billions of Apple's revenue every year comes through app downloads, and the money that is paid by the developers who are publishing their apps on the App Store, or the users that are using the apps on the App Store. So it just goes on to show that generation after generation, like history repeats itself, and innovators and disruptors are always the mocked at, whether it was Henry Ford or whether it was Steve Jobs. Okay, and secondly, I think towards the end of the chapter, you also mentioned that if innovators fail, there's no reason for anybody to mock them, because people very often tell me, what if Bitcoin fails? And I always tell them, if Bitcoin fails, the joke is not on Bitcoiners, the joke is on people who did not adopt Bitcoin. Okay, our job is not to make Bitcoin successful. Our job is just to adopt Bitcoin, educate people. Okay, and we're doing our part. If it fails, the joke is on you, not on me. Yeah,
truly, yeah. I completely agree. So it's like Bitcoin is freedom money, and I always say the similar thing to people when they ask me that what if Bitcoin 15 years is of course good enough for any project to claim itself to be money for the world. And I say that it's an experiment, but it's based on freedom, it's based on truth, it's based on people transacting freely on the internet. So if you have a problem, then the problem is not the experiment, the problem is you. So we're running an experiment, you can join us. There's no reason that
it's smart money. But it's smart money for a down society. So it's not Bitcoin's fault. It's the society's fault. It is smart money in a down society. We're advocating for smart money in a down society.
True.
The joke is not on us.
Truly.
Yeah, I think in that case, it will be taken up and gobbled by the smart people, and the other people will start crying foul. That's what happens with most of the innovation, right? They say, I think it's not Mark Anderson, but like pretty old quote, which goes something like, the world is relatively flat, but something like that, which basically points to the fact that everyone is almost equal, but some are a little unequal because they take the first steps.
Nice. Hey Praveen, thanks for joining us. Yes,
one question there, Shreyas, as in you mentioned, open source developers are like entrepreneurs. Are they so?
In the definition of this book, they might not be, because it did define that entrepreneurs are taking that risk because they are incentivized to profit from it. And they're not really adjusting the capital structure of the overall economy, which actually open source defies, right? So Satoshi defied it for the world to see, that I built this open source infrastructure, and the entire capital structure of the world economy is shifting to it. So, and without profit, right? Satoshi, for all we know, in public record, has not taken any profit for building Bitcoin. So, yes, that's an interesting debate. But I actually think that it is true, because open source development, as we have seen, that Bitcoin is 100 times more valuable than gold. So any entrepreneur that is digging into earth to find more gold is currently is not positioned or probable to get more profit as somebody who's simply working at McDonald's in words of Michael Saylor and just stacking sats, because that person is more likely to have accumulated wealth than the gold miner. So it's like, even if you're an open source developer, I think you are shifting capital structure. And the definition of this book, it might not fit that. So it's an open question, honestly, to me at least.
And what would be Shala? So it basically corollary flows from there, as in stuff that we are doing as part of Vikshala, which is educating people. Will that be called entrepreneurship, or will that not be called entrepreneurship? We definitely feel that we are creating something useful, but is the test of creating something useful the money that someone pays for it, or is it something else? Like, how do we figure out how much value that we are creating?
Yep. These are Really good question. I think I can't remember who said it, but it's somebody said that when an entrepreneur takes on a journey, they either come up with the product that the consumer really loves, or they come up with a classroom full of people who are paying them money to produce valuable education. So I think any education initiative, by its nature, is an entrepreneurial activity because people will pay you for good education. This is the value for value thesis as well. That we are used to producing content on the internet freely. So sometimes people mock that nobody is ever going to pay you sats just for creating content. But I think that if you're able to provide value to people, and if it's just 1,000 people who are deriving value, then it's the peer-to-peer or free market thesis, right? Then there's no reason that people will not pay you if they find the content valuable.
I think like in social media, you create a content, and then in place of money, you get a follower, right? And I think that should also be called entrepreneurship, because you have a sense of what content will be valuable, and the reward that you get in exchange is attention, and that's okay. I mean, if you count money as a currency, attention should also be some kind of currency. And so in that sense, I think if enough people are paying attention to something, I mean, some people can say,
Right.
it might be that they are recognizing someone's desire, but like in general, they're creating something useful that other people are queuing up to watch, queuing up to hear or see. Yeah.
Right. I find this conversation really fascinating because I think before Facebook and big tech really came to be, in hindsight, it's really easy to say that they are violating our privacy and data. But I think when internet emerged, it was an open network, and still relatively easy. You can build a social media app, and I mean, Nostr is the living, breathing example of it. It's like people have the option to go to a censorship-resistant media, go to a privacy-preserving, respecting ways of communicating online. But Facebook is creating value, you would say, right? That people are paying Facebook by leaking their privacy, but it's a value exchange. Most people are not aware, and Facebook does that in very insidious ways, which is not the free market thesis because you're not being transparent with what you're offering to the person. But this is how it's monetized, and this is how it's a living success that people are paying Facebook, and Facebook is using that data to monetize itself. So, yep. I think Nostr, eventually I imagine something like Reddit. I have used Reddit until a few years ago, I was using Reddit a lot. And if Reddit had the feature of zapping, like on Nostr, I think some client will eventually build that beautiful interface of great, insightful comments and just great research.
There's Stacker News.
Right. I have read a few articles of Stacker News, but I don't think it gives the Reddit experience. It gives a very, I think it's
news experience.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, maybe it's the UX thing, or maybe it's just my bias. Maybe some people are using. I know the Stacker News is quite popular in Bitcoin, but yeah, I think Basanta is currently building a Nostr client in the same spirit. So yeah, it's an entrepreneurial activity that he's taking. But I think it's only a 20-year-old phenomenon. Internet at a consumer level is just a 20 to 30-year-old invention. So internet is still nascent and we're still evolving how to use it as a society and economy. So we have finished this chapter. Yeah, if no comments, I can start with chapter 6, value, money, and price. So far, our discussion about the economy has been exclusively from the perspective of value. Value is the ultimate goal of actions and what motivates our behavior. It is personal, subjective, which means it comes from satisfying a want. If we are hungry, we consume food. If we feel lonely, we might visit a friend. Value is the removal of or fulfillment of some uneasiness, hunger, or loneliness, which makes us better off. We can come satisfactions, for example, that we like oranges more than apples and we like pears more than either. Simple value comparisons in terms of our own personal satisfactions are unproblematic. If we are both hungry and thirsty, we can quickly decide which uneasiness to remove first by considering how urgently we feel each one. But also we can make comparisons and determine which satisfaction would be greater there are no units of value. So yeah, I think there's a branch of mathematics in number theory which defines cardinal and ordinal numbers. I know ordinal have become really popular in Bitcoin, but I remember actually having a discussion with Raj about ordinals way before ordinal became an idea in Bitcoin, and
It's
he was
just ancient tensor that word.
Yeah, so ordinal has become really demonized, but ordinal is actually a mathematical term which means units or symbols or numbers which you cannot do any arithmetic with. So that's like a definition. It's like 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. But you can say that some person is more lovable to me than this person, but you cannot define that how much, right? There is no way for you to measure how much you love one friend more than the other. But in your experience, you know that it is true. So you cannot do math with it. So you probably can pay somebody more stats. That's one way of doing some calculation or measuring value. But cardinal numbers are the theory based on how cardinal numbers can be measured, calculated, and done mathematics with, an ordinal number cannot. And value, similarly, when you are hungry and thirsty at the same time. So you, by your action, define which uneasiness to remove first, and this is how you are acting on one of those values, and what is more valuable to you will act more. So this is how at least we can derive that this thing is clearly more valuable. But yeah, there are no units of value. We can make comparison and determine which satisfaction will be greater, but there are no units of value. The problem of measuring value. So just to also just give another context, I think what's one amazing fact about how science has evolved is that the unit of any measurement is named after the person who discovered it. So there is this quote that scientific experiment begins, and instead of asking how, you start to ask how much. So curiosity begins with how, right? We are just all amazed at the world we live in. This is the idea of curiosity. You want to know how things work. You want to know and ask questions. But how much? When your scientific temperament wins, because you're not trying to measure the thing itself as a unit. So unit of force is named after unit of energy is named after, I can't remember the first name, but Joule is the person, I think, behind conceptualization of energy as a unit. Similarly, power has evolved, and very fittingly, Bitcoin has Satoshi, named after the inventor of the best, most valuable money in the world. The problem of measuring value, we cannot measure the extent to which we removed uneasiness by taking a certain action. The satisfaction this brings is a feeling we experience. It has no units or exact measures. We cannot say that we like oranges 2.5 more than apples and pears 1.3 times more oranges. We cannot compare the subjective values of different people as their experience satisfactions are possible. It is nonsense to say that Adam likes pears 20% more than Beth likes pears. Perhaps Adam exclaims that he likes pears a lot, whereas Beth doesn't care for them at all. If that is how they truly feel, then Beth might offer to give Adam per pear. But this is still not a measure how much they value pears, nor is it a comparison using some universal unit of satisfaction. Beth values giving Adam the pear. Perhaps her feelings for Adam are strong and she knows he likes pears, but doesn't tell us anything about how much Beth or Adam values keeping or giving away the pear. It doesn't tell anything about how much Beth or Adam values keeping or giving away the pear. The lack of measure makes value problematic in a social setting, especially in advanced economies with long specialized production processes, which we will discuss in chapter 7. How do we economize on scarce resources so that we get as much value as possible? So if you remember, we began this book with the question that economizing or economy refers to the idea that we are trying to achieve as high value as possible with the limited resources. So this might not be each individual's agenda or purposeful behavior when they're acting, but the act of studying economics as a subject, according to this book at least, is trying to understand how we can create the most value possible with the limited resources we have. To illustrate, imagine a small society of 150 people where there is enough water to quench the thirst of 40 individuals and food to satisfy 30 of them. How do you determine which 45 are most thirsty and which thirsty are most hungry? Yep. I'll just read this note quickly. To be formally accurate, we should ask who would experience the greatest satisfaction from drinking or eating, removing the uneasiness of thirst and hunger respectively. This society could then decide to use the water and food to invest in production, which could allow them to create even more value. If 10 people are provided enough water and food to last them 3 days, then they can go get more water and food and bring it back to the others. Should this society make this investment? Should they send one party of 10 or two parties of 5 out in different directions to search? Whom should they choose to collect the newly obtained water and food? Who among the remaining population should get whatever water and food remains? Such comparisons require some measure of value, but because value is a personal experience, there isn't one. There is no solution to this economization problem. Markets solve this conundrum by using money and prices, which provide objective social relative valuations, more on this below, and therefore allow for comparisons and economizing in terms of valued goods. If pears cost us 1.3 times as much as oranges, we can easily decide how to use our purchasing power, get as much satisfaction as possible, buy pears, buy oranges, or buy some combination of both. We can make such comparisons individually as well as collaboratively. As we will see, money and prices are indispensable for an economy. We cannot function without them. Yep. I think Faisal, you have read Broken Money, right? I recently started reading it, and the first chapter is quite beautifully written by Lynn Alden. And she goes on to describe how small tribes use the ledger of oral contract as I don't think she uses the word money, but that's the record keeping or transactions that they use. That you do a favor for a small tribe because you count on them to do a favor for you in the future.
Yeah.
And
right, even favor is a currency that's portrayed first. So basically, if somebody does a favor for you, then it's like a ledger that you maintain that when they need you to return the favor.
Right. And I really love that analogy because she goes on to extend that to money. But yeah. Athar, are you saying something? Okay. Yeah, feel free if you want to say something. Yeah, Faisal, I think.
Yeah, but just a disclaimer, like generally, it's one of the best books that I've ever read, not only on Bitcoin, but not only in finance. Like one of the best books ever, and I think I read it in 2023, probably the best book that I read in 2023. But at the same time, I do feel that Lynn Alden carries some of our finance consultancy baggage into Bitcoin. So I don't agree with everything that she sees, but that's probably my opinion because she gets the concept of how injecting liquidity in the market influences Bitcoin's price and how Bitcoin behaves differently in a macro market and how it behaves differently in a micro market. So I might be opposed to that concept because a lot of people that come from finance background use the same glasses that they use to gauge stock market, for instance, and they use the same parameters to analyze Bitcoin. And that is what maybe my inference is incorrect, but I very often feel that finance people, they don't understand that Bitcoin is something unprecedented. So the tools that you already have available at your disposal cannot be used to gauge Bitcoin. If something is unprecedented, then to understand it, you need tools that are unprecedented. But a lot of people in the finance industry will use the same parameters that they use to determine how valuable a stock is. To determine how valuable Bitcoin is. And I find that she does that very often. She tries to analyze Bitcoin as if it's an asset, as if it's a stock, and as if it's influenced actually by the macro market or the micro market. So yeah, just a disclaimer that I don't agree with everything that she says in the book or even outside that. But other than that, the book is absolutely fantastic.
Right. No, those are interesting points because I agree that a lot of finance people who are entering Bitcoin come with a certain lens of comparing it, or I don't know, maybe it's a language thing that they use terminologies which compare Bitcoin directly to the stock market, which sometimes just goes against the entire idea. It's like Bitcoin is not supposed to just be an asset that you buy and just, I don't know, it's good. I think store value is an asset. By definition, you store value by exchanging value, by producing something valuable that somebody's willing to pay you money for, and it's an asset. You can call it an asset. I don't have a problem with the term. But so I don't know if this is again.
The problem might be when you try to analyzed it using the same tools that you use to analyze contemporary assets.
Probably. So,
I mean, I might be way call me old school or whatever, but for me, there's only one metric that matters. There are 8 billion people and there are 21 million bitcoins. So that's the only metric that affects Bitcoin, in my opinion. There might be like a temporary effect, okay? Like for instance, if the interest rates are hiked by Fed, if more money is printed by Fed, if liquidity in the market is induced by the central bank to stir up the economy, these things might have a temporary effect on Bitcoin's price for a few months here and there. Okay, but if you take for the long run, then the only metric that matters is 21 million Bitcoins and 8 billion people. And Bitcoins will never be more than 21 million, but people will keep on increasing from 8 to 9 to 10 to 11 to 12.
I agree. So, I wanted to make one point about what you said about the analysis that they do. I can't seem to recall right now, but yeah, I think for me also, I've seen a lot of people do not grasp Bitcoin because they simply just look at the price. I mean, we've all faced this, and I've personally started to not care and also be happy. Essentially, it's a very selfish thing, but also it's like you don't get it. It's good for me. It's like it remains undervalued and cheap for longer. So
yeah, there's a quote unquote evil Bitcoiner in all of us.
Yeah. So as long as Bitcoin is censorship resistant, as long as you are free to use Bitcoin whenever you want to, it is fulfilling its promise. It is not owed to somebody that they get it and they start using it.
Just to play devil's advocate here, we do want to pump our backs too, right? Like if
it's eventually going to happen. That's my argument. My argument is not that I don't care about it. I know that it's inevitable.
I think Srinath, the more appropriate or the more sophisticated way of framing your sentence would be that you don't feel sorry for people who don't own Bitcoin.
Right.
Yeah, I don't feel sorry for them.
Right. Right. I can't remember what the point that I wanted to make. It was about something to do with how, I think finance people, Lynn Alden has started to not do that anymore. Finance people I've seen always, it's like they're always wanting to be politically correct. They never call out central banking for what it is, like a big gunda sitting in the room, right? It's like, why are we even talking about this guy, right? Let's just get him out. So I love Seyfriedin's take on that because of it. I think Greg Foss, not Luke Groman. Luke Groman is another macro analyst. But Greg Foss, he does talk about finance, but does not go into Bitcoin technicals or anything about Bitcoin's censorship resistance. But he does say that central banking is a scam, fiat currency is going to zero, which I've seen Lynn Alden now start to do. But a lot of financial analysts avoid talking about central banking as a scam.
Yeah, but I don't want to make it about one person specifically, but I told you, these people come with a baggage. A few days ago, I did hear or read her on X endorsing, subtly she did not use that word, but it was pretty obvious from the way she was talking that she's somebody who's absolutely okay with JPEGs being inscribed on the Bitcoin network. So yeah.
Right, you clearly hate audience, right?
I personally feel that, I've said this so many times, so I won't really take up too much of time. I feel that, it's not that, there are other places for you to do this, right? Like, the stake is so high for Bitcoin, and I've said this many times. I personally believe we have never seen something like Bitcoin, which most of us believe. And I believe that we will never see anything like Bitcoin. The stakes are so high. This is probably humanity's only avenue to come out of this rigid monetary ecosystem. And for the first time, have money that cannot be manipulated by humans. That gives a level playing field for everyone, okay? Irrespective of whether you're living in New York or whether you're living in Somalia, or whether you're living anywhere. It gives you a level playing field. For the first time, we have it. And if we sabotage this, like we've seen so many cryptocurrencies, they get hacked, they get rug pulled because people try to do these fancy things. I feel if Bitcoin does one thing, if it turns out to be a good and stable store of value, we bound the party. Okay, Michael Singer recently said that unit of exchange is a distraction. Bitcoin is a store of value. Okay, so I have always believed that if Bitcoin turns out to be a successful store of value, we won the battle. Even if it's not a unit of exchange, if it's a unit of exchange, great. Okay, but even if it's not a unit of exchange, if it's only a good store of value, we won the battle, and it's the biggest problem that we are trying to solve. So the stakes are too high for you to do stupid things on this beautiful software, which I believe is the most precious piece of code humans have ever written. You don't want to put stupid things and on
Right.
you don't want to do stupid or flashy things with this precious piece of code. If we mess up, then we are answerable to the future generations. That's all my point is, because
Right.
you can do this elsewhere. Like you can build a drive chain, you can have some L2, you can build 20 other blockchains to scratch it. You don't need Bitcoin to do that. That's what my take is.
One good thing here is that there's a saying, right? You play stupid games, win stupid prizes. So eventually, these guys they will lose their sats. They'll run out of the sats.
So what was that? Board apes, right? They were being sold for millions and millions, right?
Yeah.
What was the price? Now people are not even buying them for $10. I mean, like popular people like Neymar and on this, I think it was Jay-Z as well. Yeah, Snoop Dogg, these billionaires.
That's also released.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, and these people bought. I mean, they put it on their profile picture, and they actually spend millions to buy it. And today they are not even being sold for $10. Okay, so it's absolutely stupid.
Yeah.
So
Guys, I just want to correct myself. Earlier, I said that pump our backs, which was absolutely wrong. We're not pumping our backs. I mean, pumping our backs would mean that there is a dump later or something bad we want to dump on later. It's not that. I just want
Just
to
pump and never dump.
yeah, pump. Yeah.
So if I'm trying to find another video version of this, the video I've sent, it's like a dramatized version if you are into that aspects of it. I will suggest at least starting Fibonacci numbers and the golden ratio. I think it should be renamed to Bitcoin ratio because at this point, all of us understand the problems with gold. And it's fascinating to me that this video actually goes into very amazing sacred geometry research, a lot of good researchers as well. And I think the only problem, as Faisal said, that society has been running into cycles, right? It's like if you zoom out just a tad bit, you do not zoom out, you do not need to go thousands of years, you only need to go maybe 2 centuries. You realize that society is running in circles, right? We always run into circles of destruction, creation, and Bitcoin is our only platform to finally elevate ourselves from that as a society, as an economy, as individuals, etc. So yeah, I completely agree. It's a civilization and species changing technology, and it finally allows us to use the golden ratio in economy. It's like we never had a free market money to arrive at free market prices, and Bitcoin is presenting the opportunity. So I think we're going to see Fibonacci number sequence in the prices of goods and services. This is my bold, wild, stupid, naive claim. I think it was never possible before because we never had a sound money. So yeah.
I think point being, probably the world's population might peak in before 2040, and so in general, like the goods and services that the world consumes, unless the quality goes like massively up, and a lot of it will be automated away through robots and through AI. So there'll be lesser number of people, a lot of work will get automated. So in that sense, I believe, I mean, the times of inflationary currency is anyways over. And like Bitcoin is an even more significant, Bitcoin becomes even more significant.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you guys would have come across Jeff Snyder. He has a podcast called Eurodollar University, and it's many articles. So he's also a traditional macro guy, and slowly they also now accepting or realizing the potential of. He's more into the Eurodollar thing, and he points specific things like how what are all the qualities that Bitcoin are like not the base there, something on top of it that it should have so that it can slowly move into the role of a currency. Like it gets the store of value. I say that this kind of an picture, it can fulfill the role of a currency thing. So the focus on something like sections in which developers should look into so that they can mature, make the system a little bit mature.
Yep. I think it's one of the biggest open questions in Bitcoin, how to scale it to 8 billion people. It's of course not happening on layer 1, and layer 2 solutions. Lightning Network is quite stable. I think somebody said that, I don't know how, so I might be, don't take this as a word, but somebody said that there is an analysis which has posited that after 100 million Lightning nodes or some metric, the network topology falls on itself. You cannot sustainably route payments, or you cannot sustainably do the channel graph updates. So Lightning Network cannot onboard 8 billion people for sure. So we will need other scaling technologies. But yeah, that's an open question.
There can be firstly, I feel that, by the time, I think you mentioned 100 million nodes. Okay, so it's like the current version of Lightning Network that cannot accommodate 100 million nodes. By the time you reach 100 million nodes, there will be breakthroughs in technology that might facilitate that. Okay, and like currently, for instance, aviation sector is capable of catering 8 billion people. Okay, all 8 billion people don't fly, but whatever number of people fly. Okay, let's assume even 5% of people fly. That's 5% of 8 billion people. The current aviation industry is capable of catering that many people. The aviation industry probably 50 or 70 years ago wasn't capable of catering so many people. So as time passes, technology evolves, and we see breakthroughs and disruptions. So by the time we reach 100 million nodes, you can't bet against the fact that there will be upgradation in the Lightning Network that will be able to accommodate more number of nodes. Okay, currently it cannot, but in the future you never know, it will. And secondly, we don't have to necessarily rely on one, like L2. Okay, there can be multiple L2s. They can be liquid, they can be lightning, they can be something else. Okay, so yeah, you don't necessarily have to rely on one thing. I mean, one thing does not need to be the solution of all problems.
True.
It's not lightning or nothing. It's not that lightning or mainnet. No, it can be mainnet. Mainnet has to be one, but layer 2 there can be 100 different layer 2s.
Right. I think there's a great talk by Andres on a very similar idea that we need to stress test the system to be able to say that scaling happens or not happens. So currently, I don't think Lightning Network is unstable and not able to onboard. So yeah, it's like we have to first get the users and the demand for Bitcoin to get stress tested, and then breakthroughs can potentially speak. The talk by Andrea goes into how internet also mocked that nobody is ever going to use it for other than text messages. But internet is literally sending live streams of high quality streams from anywhere in the world at high fidelity. So it's like at the speed of light. So it's as good as it can get. So yep, there's no reason that Bitcoin cannot do that.
Yeah, true. And it didn't scale over a period of time, right? It was not able to cater the traffic that it does today 20 years ago. Okay, so making
even 5 to 10 years ago. Yeah, these innovations
exactly. So you can't make predictions about how a certain technology will be able to cope up with increasing usage 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the line. As the number of people that use the Lightning Network increase, then obviously the development will also increase. The money that gets poured into development will also increase. The developers that will work on it will also increase, and the technology will also evolve, become more robust, and hopefully will be able to cater the increasing usage.
Yeah, that's also why I think open source developers are entrepreneurs. So they are bringing a lot of value, and yeah, there is a direct incentivization to pay them handsomely as well.
Shreyan, could you share what you said about the 100 million nodes?
So yeah, it's so I know covenants are very
It's okay. Do it later. Share it in the chat later if you
Yes,
find
yes.
it.
No, I was just saying that it was said by somebody who's a proponent of governance as a scaling solution. So I know there's a lot of love and hate relationship in Bitcoin with governance. So yeah, the developer working on it made that comment that Lightning can onboard 100 million users. I don't think he said nodes. And that's a great solution. It works perfectly for 100 million users, but we need something else for 8 billion people. So yeah, currently
I think that it's just like an arbitrary number that he chose, I believe. There's no math behind it.
Probably.
Yeah, that there cannot be any math behind it. I think it's just an example, an arbitrary number that he must have chosen.
Right. I think once C2 organizes Lightning protocol development, we can probably go into details of it. Is Bitshala planning to organize Lightning protocol in future?
No. So Bitshala has plans of doing BPD next.
Right.
It's already up. The website is up. And
Yeah,
people
but
can
in the future, like sometime we can do in the future.
LPD probably will not happen from Bitshala anytime soon, but we all can do it. Like after Lightning is over, I was thinking we can do something equivalent to mastering, like programming Bitcoin. If there's a more technical book in Lightning, we can probably attempt that. LPD is going to be theoretical. We can also attempt that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. That is what my point was. I mean, I went through BPD and it's completely theoretical, and Lightning will also be like pretty theoretical. But at the same time, you also have to like my opinion is like, most people that attend a Tuesday session are like, they regularly attend all the other sessions and they regularly attend the cohorts as well. So I'm not aware if people will have the bandwidth to accommodate on Tuesday a book that requires you to do hands-on practice. So that is what my concern would be, because even with Lightning, none of the participants actually ran a node because of time constraints.
Yeah, and I myself dropped out from programming Bitcoin when it was happening in Bitshala. So so probably LPD is a safer choice, but we can see when our programming like mastering Lightning gets over. We can see which one makes sense.
Yeah,
but it's not the Bitshala code. We will have to like do it on our own. And this time around, we can post it on Meetup and Luma as well for other people to join it from outside.
So yeah.
Okay, so I think we will stop this session for now. We will continue from the use of money from next time. I'll stop sharing my screen.